I don't even know where to start. If you've managed to intercept this, then odds are that you're in for a bad time. If you're one of the bastards back home who got me into this mess, then I hope you rot. Either way, I'm trying to send this out to as many people as possible. At the very least, you deserve a little warning of what's to come. From the top, my name is Valance. For the past 7 years now, I believe, I have honestly lost track of time. Anyway, I have been stationed on the moon. I'm a geologist, called up here to help with a mining operation after some unknown minerals were found. Unfortunately, I'm the last person alive up here now, and I don't see that lasting too much longer. So, consider this my last will and testament. I ain't getting out of here, and I'll be damned if the rot is getting out of here either. Guess if I have any solace, it's that the bigwigs who were up here bit it first. Okay, none of this is going to make sense unless we start from the top. The big thing you need to know is that the space race ended and became more of a space marathon. It wasn't about who finished first. It was just about getting there and setting up your territory to see what you could find. The states ended up working together with other countries. China, the former Soviets, India. Basically, anyone who could pop a rocket into orbit got an invitation. Hooray, world unity, right? Not when it comes to this. Everyone is up here working together, but they're about to end the entirety of humanity through their combined efforts. All their resources went into building a nice little outpost up here on the moon, though I'm not sure what the original purpose of it was. Eventually, probably around, 6 years or so ago from the briefing I got, they started mining. Initially, it started out as just a let's find out what's under the surface type of thing. Innocent enough, right? Find some rare minerals and maybe change how things operate on Earth. Except, the mining is what got us into this stupid situation. About 3 years ago was when they found the Great Table. That's the technical term for it anyway. Apparently, it was during one of the regular mining operations. Workers tunneling under the surface of the moon. Seems like a fantastic idea, right? Ended up breaking through into this huge hollow antechamber. Big discovery, right? Turns out, Hollow Moon was the least of our conspiracy-addled worries. This place was big, located pretty damn close to the center of the satellite. But it didn't match up. The dimensions of the place made no goddamn sense when compared to our measurements of the moon itself. When placed in comparison to the surface area, our tunnels and everything else, it's like it took up far more room than physically possible. Yet, nothing was different if you were looking down from the surface. That threw everyone for one hell of a loop, naturally. I was already here for a geological survey, testing out samples that some of the excavation crew brought back and seeing what they compared to back on Earth. Nothing too crazy, and the pay was good at the start, especially for how easy the work was. Most of the materials found up here were just different forms of basalt, silicon, the occasional deposit of iron, all stuff we've seen before. I can still remember watching the live feed when they found the chamber. We had excavated down probably 300 miles below the surface of Earth's lunar body. As far as what they were trying to find, I don't know. Maybe they were hoping for water or some new energy source. Instead, we found a vast, empty cavern that steadily kept sloping downward. I honestly was surprised we didn't hit the top of it and fall through, instead crashing through almost perfectly perpendicular to the floor of it. They set up an elevator to get more of us down there before long, and let me tell you, just stepping into that cavern almost broke my brain. See, one thing the moon has going for it is the lack of light pollution. Set up at the right spot on the base, and you could see stars you never thought existed. Entire galaxies were visible far off, almost to the naked eye, if you looked hard enough. One of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen, and you could catch it from almost anywhere on the surface. In here though, complete darkness. It was a void, even with our strongest lights set up. Couldn't see the top of the place. No ceiling above. just the dark absence of anything. It was the first time I'd seen complete darkness in a while, and something about it was just primal. Everything in me told me to run the moment I stepped down there. We eventually set up a full base camp and started exploring the chamber. We never found an end to it. The entire thing just stretched on forever, even after we had an estimated 600 miles covered. There's no way we wouldn't find some end around there with the dimensions of the moon. I fully expected to come across a massive cavern wall at any point, ready to crack through to the surface on the other side, or at least into something. But no, we just kept moving, until we found the Great Table. I wasn't on the mission that found the first bit of rot. I did see that team when they got brought back through our base camp though. The videos they had, God, it was like a bad movie. The pale lights of their suits were lighting solid rock in every direction, the darkness beyond encroaching like it was trying to take the team. Eventually though, the color of the rock changed. It was so gradual you would hardly notice it at first, just the lightest hint of dark creeping into the grey rock. Eventually though, it started clustering, darkening the grey to a dark charcoal color. Eventually, it took over so fully, such a dark black, that it mixed into the abyss around them, making ground near indistinguishable from the void. Even with a more high-powered light, it still looked like the team was just floating in space, likely to fall into the ground at any moment. Every so often, there would be a crack in the floor, a deep green breaking through the black. I can't really blame the team for being hesitant to check it, but eventually one of them noticed that the cracks were pulsating. One finally suggested that he believed it was glowing, and that was where the first mistake was made. The 5 members of the team gathered close, each putting a hand on another before turning off their lights one by one down the line. As the darkness began closing in with each one deigniting, the green glow of the cracks became more defined. They were indeed pulsating, the green ebbing and flowing from one direction as it went in waves. The team took a moment to orient themselves, keeping their lights off while turning to face the direction the pulse was originating from. The last one in line tripped in the shuffle, losing his hand on the one in front of him. There was a brief shout, terror filling his voice. Then it was gone. His camera feed blinked out with a small burst of glitched pixels. The rest of the team turned their lights on immediately, shouting for him to do the same and stay close. Their cameras panned in every direction, desperately searching for their friend there just moments before. Nothing, just the cracks, still pulsating a faint green against their pale lights. The 5th member of their party was gone, nowhere in sight. The fear in their faces as the suit cams kept shaking, everyone desperately turning to try and find their teammate. It's something I've never been able to shake. That was 4 years ago now, and looking back, that was our sign to get the hell out of here. The team followed their line back after a while, making it back to base camp after a couple of days. None of them were normal though. Everyone began to steadily decline, their health beginning to crash out, starting with intense bouts of insomnia. By the time they were brought back through my segment of the base, it was like seeing corpses get walked through. They couldn't be taken out of their suits at this point due to how damn frail they were, worrying that they could break a limb in the process of getting them out or back in for transport. They were just wasting away in there. By the time they got back to the surface, they were practically soup in there. So damn decomposed, their bodies just melted within hours. I don't know if it was the rapid rise back to the surface. Maybe a change in atmospheric pressure? I don't know, but the reports we got back were that they had to just dispose of the suits themselves because they were dead and gone. Unfortunately, however, they disposing of the suit wasn't enough. Despite the rotten corpses sloshing around inside the atmospheric suits, God, it makes me gag just thinking about it. The footage we got from up here a couple of days later was something even more disturbing than the fear I had seen on their faces just days before. They sent us the security tapes. I guess that in absence of any real idea of what to do with their festering bodies in those suits, they were just put in a cold storage in hopes of, I don't know, stalling any further putrefaction? They were in a deep freezer that was serving as a makeshift morgue, suits still on, and the gases inside causing them to stay rigid, nearly laying on the tables. God, the poor bastard that had to move them. Ugh. Through the cameras, you could see little droplets on the visors of the suits from what they were now. Anyways, it was maybe 12 hours? Not that long after they were put in there, one of the four just gets up, starts walking around like not a damn thing happened. The other three followed not long after, suits getting up and walking around the small cold storage area. Eventually, they started banging on the door, and I swear we could hear screams over the recording, begging to be let out, wailing in pain and misery. The first poor bastard that answered their cries. Well, he might have been the luckiest of us. Soon as the door opened, he was grabbed, one suit to each of his limbs. They just pulled, kept pulling, even after he came apart. Another guard came in once he heard those screams, started shooting at the whole group of them. When it busted through the suits, it was like they deflated. Only a decaying skeleton and dissolved flesh left inside. I don't know if maybe their souls couldn't escape the suits. I honestly don't fucking know. Maybe the pressure release just made it harder for them to move with the suits on. I don't know. I'm just a guy who studies rocks, for fuck's sake. They didn't move much more after that, though not for a lack of trying. Just couldn't get far in their incredibly fucked up state. The guy they tore apart was dead though. Dead for real. Good for him. For some fucked up reason, they kept sending people to explore the cavern, even after all that. Sunk cost fallacy, I guess. Might as well keep exploring when you've already put this much money into it. Lo and fucking behold, we find the Great Table a few miles further than where they left. The epicenter of those cracks, the pulsating light, it was huge. This massive slab of rock in the middle of nothing. That same dark black as the surrounding stone, so dark that one of our guys ran into it. For a moment, they thought it was a wall, but eventually realized they could go around it. All told, it took maybe half a day to circumnavigate the entire thing, and we're not entirely sure how tall it was. The cracks ended underneath it though, the pulsating green much more intense here than before. Every wave of light through it made it look like the table was breathing. Look, I want to preface all of this with, I don't know who's handing down orders for all we're doing up here. They gave the direction though, and we had no choice but to follow. A camp was set up next to the Great Table, and they tried to take a sample of the rock that it was made of. Except, they couldn't. Nothing could cut through it, even the most advanced mining tools we brought up there. They used everything. Drills, diamond saws, plasma. Nothing could get a damn scratch on the thing. Eventually, someone tried to examine it right then and there, but it was just too much to get any kind of reading on. Nothing we had on Earth or the moon so far lined up with whatever this element was. We spent months working on it, with the team by the table doing what they could to gather a sample. At some point about a year and a half ago, whoever was up tops sent down the order to try a controlled demolition. They set up about 2 miles away from the main table camp, setting up concussive charges to break through the base. Look, we all had our concerns that we voiced. They fell on deaf ears though. Nobody hearing our cries for some kind of, I don't know, patience, some sort of sense when it came to busting through this unknown rock with explosives. Instead, we were told that if the crew at the table didn't do it, they'd just be replaced with someone that would. The rest of us were told we were equally replaceable, unfortunately, and that was that. I remember watching the live feed when they broke through. All of us gathered around to see if this would either be completely useless or the start of our damnation. Everyone knew, I think, that what we were doing was going to be nothing but bad for us. Guess someone had profit on the line though, so it was either we go along with it or go back home with jack shit in hand. Most of us chose to keep our livelihood at the time. Anyway, a few controlled explosives were put in at the base of the Great Table. Everyone cleared out to make room for the blast. And off it went. When the smoke finally cleared, all it had made was the smallest crack in the center, right where it connected to the ground. The crack made its way up the wall to the great table, jagged and thin, just a hairline fracture practically. Through it though was that same faint green glow. Where the table met the floor of the cavern also began to crack, spreading right along the corner and separating from the rock floor. We broke the table open only a hair, and that was enough. The crew stepped toward the crack to inspect it. We still don't really know what happened to them. From the brief seconds we caught on camera, it looked like they were sucked through, suits folding in on themselves with the people still inside as they were absorbed into the cracks. They barely had time to scream, basically being compressed into nothingness the moment they stepped close to the damn thing. It was like a fucking black hole contained to a 5-foot radius of the table. We weren't able to see what was on the other side either, suits getting their cameras crushed right along with their inhabitants. Needless to say, they didn't send anyone else too close after that. Not that it really mattered, because things started to go on a steady decline from there. The rot started to take over, slowly at first, corruption spreading from the cracks at the great table. The physical signs of it were relatively subtle the closer you are to the table, but the mental toll it takes. People close to the base camps started breaking down, changing mentally and physically. Their bodies atrophied, sometimes in days, sometimes weeks, and their minds started to go right along with their bodies. Long losses of memory, rambling and sudden violent outbursts. There wasn't any kind of real pattern to how people got sick. It seemingly picked and chose at random, settling in with relatively subtlety in the beginning. The first signs of rot were degradation of appetite, loss of sleep, and a general irritability. That started things on the course for chaos already, leading to plenty of workers assigned to the Great Table Camp to develop resentment and paranoia of their fellows. By the time that they began exhibiting physical signs, they were often delusional and violent, with an incredible disregard for the safety of themselves and others. Isolated incidents of violence and attacks became more frequent as the infection of rot became more advanced. As their mental state digressed, most would turn to attacking their fellow workers, believing that it would slow their decay. Whether that was true or not is a whole nother issue, but they seemed to believe that the more gruesome the kill, the more it would save them from the hell they were experiencing. The bodies began to stack up, gruesomely too. They would practically slice others up and turn them into makeshift altars to some deity. That's actually how we ended up with the name Rot, believe it or not. Many of them would whisper about feeding the rot as a sort of appeasement to it, giving it a non-resistant body to begin decaying further. They tended to only attack those that were healthier in turn, so things only began to devolve faster. Starting out, they were able to restrain the few that were disadvantaged in rot, but eventually, the sick outnumbered the healthy, or those still living at least. Keep in mind that I'm not an expert in how all of this went down near the Great Table Camp, because most of this was just received through survivor reports when they reached the nearest camp. They sent word back through, and it was pretty much over then and there. All of us collectively put in our resignation, storming back to the main outpost above, and demanding to be sent back home before this went any further. Maybe that was our own dumbass thinking. Looking back, we should have known we weren't getting out of here. They stopped any kind of transport immediately, nobody in, nobody out, and locked us the hell down. For a few days, we forgot all about the chaos below the surface as things went to hell up top. Everyone rebelling and turning to violence in light of their likely impending death. Some people lost it, others managed to pull their shit together. Either way, none of us had very long. I ended up going back to the surface. Camps down below were, well, they were bad. Most of them fell to infighting within a couple of weeks. Those that didn't had to tend with the rot as it spread further from the Great Table. The dark black color of the rock crept further and further out from it. A message we received from the nearest camp to the Great Table said, It reached them about a week after things went to hell. 6 months passed, and the entire chamber was a dark, rotting black rock, all the way to the elevator shaft I was originally stationed at. Needless to say, the lift was shut down, so it's a damn good thing that I had already moved up, though it feels like I was just delaying the inevitable at that point. The real problems began not long after everyone fled to the surface. We shut off the lift, basically made our own little security force up top that were constantly on watch for any of the rot or those corrupted with it trying to make their way up. I got put on the mind-numbing job of watching camera monitors. Honestly, seeing the monitor room for the first time made me feel like we were being experimented on, observed. Cameras were everywhere up here and down below, capturing every small movement that we made. Not sure who was disinvested in watching them all before I came along, but for me, it became watching our death slowly make its way to us. Everywhere down there was taken at this point. The cracks had spread further, trailing along with the darkness that set into the rock from the great table. As they spread, though, it was like the light in them became brighter, more powerful as it corrupted more and more of the moon. The poor bastards that remained down there, well, the ones that were living, wouldn't stay that way for long. The rot was corrupting people at a much faster rate the further they were from the great table. It's like the symptoms were dialed up to 11 as distance grew from the initial cracks, leading to a more spontaneous burst in violence before rotting away, trapped as muscles atrophied and left decaying corpses behind. Some were collapsed around the chamber, still in Atmo suits, as they desperately tried to find some other form of shelter before they were taken. Others were in the pop-up habitats we had scattered through the camps down there, right in full 4K glory on the cameras, rotting away as their brains remained fully aware of what happened around them. Some didn't get the mental psychosis. I think that was the worst part to see. There was no hint of violence, malice, or anything when they spoke, but you could see their bodies beginning to break down. I watched one poor man. Overnight, he began to go downhill. His muscles ached, it hurt as well, and when he tried to stand up, his bones were so brittle that his legs simply broke. He was stranded there as the rest of him biologically degraded over the next few hours, a waxy look creeping into his face before skin began flaking off, revealing a skull with eyeballs beginning to sag from it. I made it a point to start flipping away from his camera when it came up in rotation because he ended up staring straight into it, almost right through the cam and into my damn soul. Still gives me shivers when I think about it, even after he moved later on. I watched the cracks reach all the way to the lift before they stopped spreading completely. We honestly thought we were fucking saved. The cracks weren't an issue anymore. We had a couple of months where we even started deluding ourselves into thinking we might get out of here. A couple of the guys had been sending radio signals back to Earth, trying to get into contact with someone who could tell people about us. We were finally getting through to someone that was taking us seriously. But that was all for nothing, I guess. The bloom began to take hold a few months ago. I wasn't sure if I was actually seeing reality at first, or if I was finally losing my damn mind. Figured the stress of everything finally caught up, or worse, that the rot might finally have found a way up here to take me out. It took me a few minutes to reconcile that I wasn't just losing my damn mind up here. I was going through the cameras one day, just going monitor by monitor, flipping through whatever feeds were still coming from down there. And everything changed. It was that same atrophied man, the one that broke his legs trying to get up and was forced to sit there, feeling his body decay around him. The skeleton was partially broken down by this point, part of a decaying eye still dangling from the socket, as whatever internal organs he had left continued to rot away inside him. I had noticed there was a point of slower decay, usually after the skin sloughed off, and they just remained there as putrid frames, skeletal forms barely holding their remaining organs in as they rotted. I think it was so odd that it just didn't compute at first. But right behind that dangling eyeball was a blooming bright blue flower. I don't know how long I stared at it, only to flip away and flip right back, convinced it was just me losing my mind, But no, I started noticing it in other areas too as I flipped through monitors. There were flowers blooming deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, green light pulsating through the cracks in the floor around them as they blossomed into beautiful colors on all the rotting corpses. Those closest to the great table were the first to undergo the full process. Before long, their bodies were covered. An entire bouquet of blues, yellows, reds, pinks, greens, purples, so many beautiful vivid colors that I've never heard a name for, bursting forth on these decayed horror mannequins. A breathtaking sight. The vines of the flowers blooming on them would wind their way around the skeletal remains, covering bone and making them into whole new beings. Then they started to move again, slow at first, like they were just learning to propel themselves. But before long, the dead began to get up and walk once more. At the great table, even those that had been murdered and offered up as sacrifices to the rot began to be overcome by the bloom, leading to a whole second life as vine overtook rotted veins and muscles, moving them like puppets, all towards us. Their numbers grew, with those from the great table blooming in turn at a more rapid rate, before joining the horde of floral zombies moving ever closer to the lift. I alerted the others as soon as the bloom started, so everyone was aware of what was happening. There were probably only 30 of us left, with more than 100 down below, making their way toward us for a reason we have yet to know. One of our guys dropped the lift before they were able to reach it, cutting the cables so there was no way for them to bring it back up. On one monitor, I watched the crash, flames briefly coming through before they were snuffed out by the lack of atmosphere. I honestly wonder if that only gave them a more precise idea of where we were. The cracks in the ground had spread all the way there already, and the green light pulsated from them in the monitors, illuminating the field of rotten flowers as they moved ever closer to the last barrier between us and them. It did no good. They broke right through, inhuman strength pulling the shaft open despite the lift wreckage in the way. I don't have any cameras inside the lift, so I don't know how the hell they did it. Bastards climbed up though, mile after mile like it was nothing. Before we knew it was up here, flowers were blooming right through the cracks in the door on the lift. Swear, this was what it felt like to see the last march of the ants from the opposing side, knowing you were about to get murdered by a goddamn plant. I locked myself off in the monitor room. I know it sounds cowardly, but what the fuck was my choice otherwise? I would have let anyone in if they asked and were still alive. But, well, it didn't take very long for things to go to hell. I had a front row view for the carnage, and it just, well, it was bad. The bloom-filled corpses stormed in through the lift gates, overpowering it and leaving an entirely new ecosystem in their wake. Some of the guys tried to fight them off, some using fire to try and take them down, others resorting to weapons they cobbled together. It was no use. The moment a bloomed saw someone that wasn't infected yet, they would grab them, no escape possible. I saw one guy who got caught right outside of the main gates get picked up by 3 of the bloomed, each one stabbing into him with thick green vines. From there, it's like they didn't drain them. It was more like they cultivated the bodies they picked up. Maybe the vines transferred seeds or spores or something. But the poor bastards on the receiving end got the unfortunate privilege of skipping the rot phase entirely. They didn't even have the vines out of that first guy when the bloom started taking him over. I don't know if it's different because the bodies are more fresh, maybe more nutrients to pull from. Who the hell knows, to be honest. In his case though, the flowers were larger, more ravenous than the ones on the previous rot victims. They were still vivid colors, but the flowers themselves sprouted larger, almost overtaking portions of the poor guy's body completely as they bloomed outward. The guy fell to the ground, twitching for only a moment, before getting up and making his way toward former allies, the huge blossoms now erupting from his body and devouring those he could get hold of. I always loved Monet paintings, and this, one of the flowers blooming on this guy, reminded me of a water lily. Huge petals, all blossoming out from the center. Floating on a pond, they would have been magnificent. But here, I saw them quickly become drenched in blood as they tore into other humans, the petal edges shredding anything they came in contact with. Before long, blood was flying everywhere as the blossom overtook even more healthy humans, all being propagated one by one as the zombies made their way forward. As the droplets of crimson covered the petals though, they were just as quickly drank by the flora, seemingly driving it toward more. All I could really do was hide here in the monitor room. There was no hope for anything out there. The monitors told me the entire story of what I had waiting for me. The bloom from down below. Well, they started spreading through the main base up here, the rot and corruption following them as they went. I saw darkness spread through the white plastic and steel we used as building materials in the base, slowly creeping up from the lift shaft. I felt like I've been in here for an eternity, trying not to make any noise or call attention to myself, unless some of the bloomed end up finding me. The rot is going to reach me first at this rate though. Everything is turning black, slowly breaking down in decay as it goes. I can see rust growing on some of the exposed steel in spots around the base. High quality cameras keeping me hyper aware of just how screwed I am. No matter what it comes up against, organic or not, this decay just spreads, corrupting anything it comes into contact with. The first crack appeared up here yesterday, right in the transport hall leading to the lift gate, where there was only dark blood staining the blackened walls from only days ago when the bloom broke in. The pulsing green light was visible in the elevator shaft before it even got up here, an ominous glow cutting through the corrupted darkness. I swear it's breathing, pulsing, feeling for any life out there that it can still take root in. Me. I'm running out of food in here. I know I'm the last living person on the moon too, watching these monitors. I got to see everyone meet their demise. The last holdout was a guy named Paulo. Good guy, worked in the cafeteria and made some of the best adobo chicken I've ever had in my life. I don't know if he forgot about them or what, but I saw him running from the bloom a few days ago, desperately trying to live despite all odds. He found the cult storage room, the same one where the initial rot victims had been kept, and tore apart another guy. Guess he didn't remember that after everything else that happened though, because the moment he opened that fucking door, he was done for. 4 Atmos suits, all bursting with flowers and greenery like a mobile terrarium, took him immediately. Vines forced their way through his skin, along his back, in his stomach, one going down his throat despite his attempts to fight back, and began to bloom immediately. He was a shade of purple that popped against the dark rot infecting the base, beautiful in the decay. So here I am, all alone, orbiting the earth, with something that would easily destroy the world slowly making its way toward me. The green cracks are spreading further in, and even though I know I'm alone, I swear I can hear people calling me. Whatever it is, knows my name too. It's all I can hear when I close my eyes. There are whispers in my ears telling me to open the door. Not like it's stopping the rot from coming through anyway. All this talking has worn me out. I'm going to try to get some sleep. Hopefully, without any of those flowery terrors coming in after me. I don't know how long I was asleep for. The rot is outside though, slowly seeping its way through the cracks in the door. There's this bad feeling I've got, telling me that the moment it spreads far enough to touch where I am, everything outside is going to know about me. I'm terrified all of them are going to come for me, tearing me apart and planting those seeds or whatever they are in me. This is going to sound suicidal, because it definitely is. I guess I feel some sense of duty though, being the last one alive up here and all. There are people back on Earth living their lives, unaware of any of the shit going on here. The rot, the bloom, all of this coming from under the Great Table. They never need to find out about it down there. I've made up my mind. Command is down the hall to my left, maybe a 70-meter dash if I have a clear shot. I don't know if there's a self-destruct button in there, but I do know there are direct controls for the ventilation and heating system. My plan is going to involve turning that on, closing off the oxygen scrubber system, and setting it to circulate the existing air in here. Nothing else. Then I'm going to the shop. There should be a direct access to it from under the command room, and it takes up most of the lower floor of the base before getting down into the lift area. I'm lighting up every flammable material I find in here and turning every nozzle wide open. The floor a few feet away from me is becoming dark, the corruption and rot getting even closer. That same whisper kept calling my name, even louder now. A scream rings out from down the hallway, making me shrink back into my chair. No putting it off. I got up and ran, bursting through the door and into the hallway with abandon. I could already hear something scraping across the floor from the opposite direction I was running, and another guttural scream burst through the still air as I ran. Command is in sight down the hall. Just have to push a little harder. A bloom burst through the wall ahead, arms flailing as it came barreling toward me, arms reaching wide as it ran. I made the best effort I could, squeezing against the wall and sliding under its arms, but one of the petals still sliced my shoulder. God, it hurts. I could never tell over the monitors, but up close, these petals have thousands of small spines on them. So fine, they were practically invisible. They stuck in the wound, stinging me further even after it had sliced through. I flipped myself in to the command door just as the thing began to turn back toward me, slamming the heavy steel in its face and hitting the pneumatic lock. That would buy me a second. I practically fell on the desk just trying to get to the computer. Blood was already soaking through my clothes below the wound, dripping down my sleeve onto my arm. I feel woozy, but I can't just stop now. Okay, check the computer. There, vent controls were one of the first things under the maintenance menu, thank God. I didn't quite think it through though. Of course, there was no way to disconnect from the oxygen scrubber. God, was that the rot fucking with my brain? Okay, plan B. Got it. There's an option to set the oxygen levels of the air inside the base, just in case anyone needed help adjusting to the atmosphere, I guess. Normally, we sit around Earth's levels, a solid 20 to 25% oxygen in the atmosphere blowing through here. How high will this thing let me take it? Holy shit, I can up the oxygen levels to 50%. 75 if I can get the emergency override code. Maybe. Oh my god, it's my lucky day. Humanity's lucky day even. The override code was scrawled on a sticky note, sitting right there on the desk. The bloom was still outside, banging on the door trying to get through. I set the levels, hearing the ventilation kick in as soon as I started turning it up. Oxygen is incredibly flammable, so just a little time and an accelerant, and we should be good to go. A vine burst through the door, scratching far into the room before it stopped and began feeling around to try and find me. Shit, time to get out of here. In the corner was a small hatch in the floor, looking right down to the workshop where all the excavation and mining equipment were kept. There would be gas line down there, an entire pump of it even, and God knows what else. Just have to get there. God, my shoulder hurts though. I really shouldn't have just looked at it either. There are small flowers beginning to bloom in the wound, where the little fibers from the petal were sticking. They were making their way further into my flesh, small sprouts beginning to pop up in vivid color. I felt my stomach turn. No, keep going, keep moving. I practically throw myself down the hatch, dropping in and falling onto a workbench nearby. I can see the tank nearby, pump hanging on a hook next to it. Limping my way over, I twist the nozzle, opening it wide and letting gas spray around the workshop area. This place has already been taken by the rot, darkness and mold covering the floor, countertops thick with a layer of grime as cracks began spreading further through. That same green pulse was already showing down here. I left the hose on the floor, still sputtering out gas as it went, and made my way over to another area. The small mechanic's bench had a welding setup nearby, huge canisters of natural gas on hand to run the torches, along with other dangerous stuff we shouldn't be playing with. Now was the time to use it though. Nozzles wide open. These things were going to help cleanse this place in just a minute. Maybe it's proximity to the rot or the wound I'm suffering. But my mind is going. I can see them coming in, the bloomed corpses making their way through doors and vents to find me. The rot tells them where I am, and they follow to claim me as part of it. The flowers are beginning to blossom in my wound, petals opening wide to drink up any blood that may still come out when I move. There's a lighter on a nearby welding bench. That's it, the final piece of my explosive puzzle. I'm going to hold out another moment, let the gas finish filling out the atmosphere of the workshop. They're coming closer though. I don't know that I can move. My legs are feeling weak, painful. Even my arms are suddenly having trouble lifting just a lighter. Just another moment. The bloom are starting to fall on me. I've backed myself toward the gasoline puddle on the floor, falling in it nearly face first. They came upon me next, and I can feel a vine puncture my back, right next to my spine. The colors are beautiful though, flowers blossoming through the pane. I flick the lighter, hoping for the best, before consciousness slips away forever. The rot still whispering my name. My last thought is that despite all the blood I've lost, I'm suddenly comfortably warm, at peace, even as the petals bloom all over my body. They are cleansed in an immediate rush of flame, purifying me to ash before the rot's decay can take me over. I wonder if those back on Earth will look up to see a beautiful garden on the moon. I pray that they see a fireball instead. And though they might not know it, they'll see their own salvation in the embers.